Hi, this week we take a look at commitment, an important part of faith. The commitments we make to God and to others. It is our action. We're going to be looking at commitment as a movement towards God, in which we invest ourselves, our lives. The story that we're looking at comes from Matthew's Gospel, and it is the calling of the disciples. Peter, Andrew, James, and John, the core of Jesus' disciples. These 4 disciples will be a part of that inner circle of Jesus' 12. And each of them are fishers. Jesus walks to the Sea of Galilee, and there he encounters Peter and Andrew. He says, "Follow me." And then he finds James and John, and he says to them, "Follow me." They make a commitment, an extraordinary commitment to do so. And we're reminded that when we make commitments to God, we might also be sometimes breaking commitments to others or redefining our relationships with them. That's what happens in this story. James and John, they leave their father in the boat mending the nets. So James and John leave, and there is a foreshadowing here later on in chapter 10, which is a critical chapter in Matthew's Gospel, because in there Jesus tells those who are following him, you have to take up your cross and follow me. You have to turn your life in my direction if you want to be my disciple. And that commitment comes with a cost. Certainly a cost that James and John bear, but also one that Zebedee is presented with as well. As a Lutheran pastor, I've noticed that within the Lutheran community, we get nervous when we talk about commitments. When we talk about giving our lives over to God or to following Christ, that sounds like some other traditions, maybe that require more of a personal attachment. Martin Luther himself disliked the book of James, in which James talks about faith being dead apart from works. Now, historically, in the context of the Reformation, of course, Luther was finding that the whole church's emphasis on working or earning your salvation was problematic, and that it used James' teaching to kind of further some of its practices like indulgence and things of that sort, where you could purchase your way to heaven. And so Luther railed against that, and his followers have always been very suspicious of needing to work connected to faith. But I think that is something we have to deal with, because unless we make a commitment individually, unless we give our lives, unless we designate our time, talent, and treasure, then we will find ourselves in the place where the Pharisees did. They felt that they were good and life was fine. They rested on their teaching and their tradition. They didn't engage the kingdom of God that Jesus was bringing to bear. They didn't follow in a way that placed God's kingdom at the center of their lives. They didn't respond to the gift of God's kingdom, the grace of God's kingdom, by following And as a result, that negatively impacted their ability to participate in what God was doing. Matthew calls us as Christians, Lutherans included, to follow Jesus, to respond to Jesus' invitation of follow me, to lay down our nets, to lay aside certain commitments so that we may give our lives faithfully in response to God. What kind of commitments of faith do you make? What kind of commitments to other things do you have to break in order to be faithful to that commitment to Christ? Some things for us to think about. Next time we get together, we're going to talk about community, because it's not just individuals, this thing of faith. This faith involves together, us as a community. But for now, wishing you well, God bless, and thanks for following along.